Hi everyone, welcome to this video on lesson 15 of the variation and inheritance scheme. This is the final lesson of the scheme of work, and really it's everything that this whole scheme of work, this series of 15 lessons has been building up towards, which is Darwin's theory of natural selection. And we kind of introduced it in the previous lesson. In this lesson, it's just a case of looking at a few more examples of this, and really just getting students to practice how to write about this. And this is useful in terms of helping them understand the theory. It's also, a good bit of training for their GCSE exams so that they're ready to answer those 3 or 4 mark questions. Obviously, they'll be practicing this nearer the time as well, but this is a good place to start. I've just gone out of focus, so I'm going to refocus there. There we go. So this lesson is actually really simple, whereas the previous lesson there's quite a lot to get your head around. This one, it's just I do, we do, you do, lots and lots of examples, and what we want students to recognise is essentially all of the answers to these natural selection questions look the same. So it's seeing that same concept across multiple concrete contexts. That's what's going to get them thinking about that really fluently. And what we want them to notice in every single one of these case studies and every single one of these examples is that there's some desired characteristic. So we said in the previous lesson how natural selection is essentially selective breeding, but it's nature doing the selection rather than human beings. So let's use this example of the lizards, whose name I forget. Let's have a look. What are they called? The Anolis lizard, I beg your pardon, I am not a biologist. So this is the Anolis lizard, and what we want to do is say, okay, let's imagine in the beginning there was variation within the species of these lizards, and some had long legs like 2 and 4, some had shorter legs like 3 and 5, and we want to say, okay, let's imagine a predator comes along and starts chasing all of these lizards. And we can ask students, and you might do this with fingers up or with whiteboards, which lizards do you think are most likely to escape the predators? Which are most likely to get away? And what you want them to spot is that the lizards that are most likely to escape are the ones with the longest legs, number 2, number 4. And we might represent this by saying, well, number 3, that didn't get very far at all before it got eaten by the predator. Number 5 got a little bit further, but it's still got pretty short legs, so that got eaten pretty soon as well. Number 1 made a really good go of it. They got all the way down here, but their legs still weren't quite long enough. They got eaten. Whereas number 2 and number 4, they managed to get away. And maybe I'll even put a kind of tick like that. Remember the tick and cross we used in the previous lesson to indicate this idea of selection. But it's nature doing the selecting. Number 2 and number 4, they had long enough legs that they managed to escape the predator. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with lizard number 2. Oops. And lizard number 4, and I'll make sure they've got nice long legs here. Lizard number 4. They escaped the predator, and they are now able to reproduce. So what we can do is show that reproduction as follows. And when they reproduce, because these have both got long legs, we might expect most of their offspring, or at least a couple, let's say they have 3 offspring. We're not sure how many they're going to have, but let's say they've got 3. Well, 2 of those are actually going to have long legs as well. So this is a very handy feature, and it seems to have been inherited by their offspring. So let's do 3 lizards, 2 have the long legs. And again, we want to emphasize that it's not that this happens in one generation. There's still going to be one, for whatever reason, born with short legs. So when the predator comes to chase again, well, what happens? These 2 manage to get away. They escape the predators. This little one with the little legs unfortunately does not. So this one is not selected. That one can no longer pass on its short-legged genes. These 2 are selected, and so on. And this process continues, and hopefully you will see from my diagram, and the aim is that students are going to see this, and they can see that it's kind of analogous to that process of selective breeding that we talked about back in lesson 12. So this is what we want to illustrate to students, so that ultimately, over many generations, all of the lizards are going to be born with the long legs, and that is now a characteristic feature of that particular species of Anolis lizard. That's what we want to illustrate, and again, you'll see the answers all have the same structure, and what we can do then is map onto our diagram how we can turn that into sentences. So the first sentence, some lizards have longer legs than others. So we've illustrated that in this one here. Then we can say the ones with the longer legs are the most likely to survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes. Therefore, that's this stage, so that we're turning that into words. And then we can say something about their offspring, that over many generations, this means they're more likely to pass on the long leg genes to their offspring. Over many generations, it's the long leg gene that's going to be the one that comes to dominate within that species. So that's kind of sentence number 3. Hopefully that's clear. And what I would recommend is, once you've got your head around this diagram, then every other diagram you could draw in basically exactly the same way. And what you want to get students thinking about is, okay, if you model, if you draw diagrams of different variants within a species, so I think the next example is in, what is it, dolphins, whales, something along those lines. Yeah, the grey whale. So the point we want to get across to students is the desired characteristic there that's going to help them survive is how much blubber the whale has. So if you draw a number of whales, some maybe with quite high surface area to volume ratios, so quite a lot of skin exposed, so to speak, some with lots of blubber with that low surface area to volume ratio, and what you want to do is get them thinking about, well, okay, which one is most likely to survive and why, and then always reminding them that if they're more likely to survive, then they're more likely to reproduce, they're more likely to pass on those long-legged genes, and therefore the proportion of offspring that are going to have, sorry, I'm getting confused between the case studies, but the proportion of offspring that are going to have the desired characteristic is going to increase over the generations until all of the organisms have that desired characteristic. So it's very, very similar to the selective breeding lesson that we did, and that's no surprise, because Darwin used his understanding of selective breeding to inform his theory of natural selection. And that's it. We've finished off this sequence of lessons, and we hope by returning to these same ideas again and again and again, that students can have a really thorough understanding of one of the most powerful scientific theories ever come up with. And that's it. That's the scheme of work in the NIT scheme of work, which is the final one for Key Stage 3, or pretty much the final one. We're going to review all of the content that we've done, and start to move students from this qualitative view of science to a quantitative view of science in the experimental and mathematical methods unit.